Um, Hello, everybody. My name is William Friedman. If you want some details on me in the press release, but if this seems a little like deja vu to you, it does to me as well. It was just a few short weeks ago, February 23rd, that I hosted a panel discussion in this space on a cryptocurrency called XRP. And if you were inspired after that call to go out and buy some, well, you just doubled your money in 6 weeks and you're welcome. But we're not here to talk about me. We are here to talk about how we, as the financial press, collectively got scooped by the art journalists um, who knew what was up with this whole Beeple auction, the NFT auction. Um, our guest today on breaking down the story is Marion Maneker, is president and editorial director of Art Media, the Penske Media Corporation division that includes ARTnews, Art in America, and Art Market Monitor. Maneker has covered the art market for more than 20 years at New York Magazine, the New York Times, the New York Sun, and then through Art Market Monitor, which he founded in 2008. Previously, Maneker was the publisher of Harper Business, the business book division of HarperCollins, and founder of the Penguin Lives series of short biographies with James Atlas. And let me just start by asking Marion if my premise is correct. How do you think the financial press did in covering this story?
Well, you mean specifically the sort of spectacular sale of the $69 million for the Beeple NFTs, or NFTs in general? Because they are slightly different stories.
Well,
And I would even
parse that for us.
Well, I mean, ultimately, this isn't an art story. This is a story about cryptocurrencies. That is, there's a distraction about art. And the art part of it we've been aware of for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, because there were some spectacular sales of NFTs in 2018. In those days, the spectacular numbers were 40,000 or 150,000. But considering what we're talking about, that's still an enormous amount of money for objects. Apologize for the beeping. For objects that really don't have any particular use, or are validated by having a deep market. So there's two issues. One, the NFT market is somewhat following people's prejudices about the art market. In the popular imagination, the art market is immoral. It is a sign of decadence. It's an element of the culture of inequality and wealth that has people spending, in the most extreme example, $450 million on a painting which many want to doubt as being a work created by Leonardo. So all of this is wrapped up in the last 20 years of the art market's growth and people's suspicion about it, and then grafted onto this issue with cryptocurrencies. In trying to think about this, I've begun to explain it to people this way, which is to say, if you're from Iceland and you've got volcanoes erupting, and suddenly frequent flyer miles have become enormously more valuable than they were even a couple of years ago, and suddenly people are bidding up flights to Iceland where they're paying $1 million for a seat. The real issue is the frequent flyer miles, but everyone wants to talk about the volcanoes and whether they're worthwhile as a tourist attraction. And is it really worth $1 million to go see a bunch of volcanoes in Iceland? That's the same thing that's going on with these works of art. For us, Beeple, you could see coming. Now, he doesn't have a long market history and he doesn't have much of a presence as an artist, but you could see it coming beginning in the late fall beginning of winter. And there were a number of sales, each more spectacular than the last. So before it hit 69 million, Beeple's work had hit 6.6 million. And before that, it had hit 2 million. And before that, in the several 100,000 range. So, you know, for a number of reasons, we could see it bubbling along.
Right. And tell us, and maybe we should go back to the beginning here. Could you tell us, first of all, who is Beeple, and then what is an NFT?
All right. Well, let's start with what an NFT is. NFTs are an outgrowth of cryptocurrency. It's using the blockchain to establish either a bill of sale or a title to a work of art. There are some NFTs that are inextricably linked to the image, and they are sold on marketplaces. There's Maker's Place, Nifty Gateway, Rareable, Super Rare. And one of the issues is these marketplaces are non-commensurate. It is not actually easy to transport an NFT purchased in one of these minted marketplaces to another. So the whole idea of the blockchain is somewhat mitigated by the fact that these objects are not portable. I mean, the first thing to always remember about the blockchain, and this has been going on now as long as we've been talking about the blockchain, when it's connected to the art world, the blockchain is about making digital objects have the properties of physical objects. Right? They can't be in the same place twice. They can't be duplicated. You can track where they are, even if you don't necessarily know who owns them. They've got anonymity, but they've got solidity. One of the problems is that many people mistook the idea that somehow blockchain would take works of art and give them digital properties. So there was an assumption for many years that somehow blockchain was going to transform the art market. But one of the issues was, how do you link the physical object, the paintings, the sculptures, to the digital object? The blockchain is not really, I mean, related to NFTs, but they weren't talking about using NFTs for that.
Yeah, but they were talking about establishing land deeds on blockchain for much the same reason.
Well, and there's been a lot of talk about using it to connect. Sorry, someone's trying to connect with me. Using it to basically handle the paperwork in the art world. And the art world is somewhat notorious for having opaque paperwork. It's not as bad as people think, but the art world has no sort of standard contracts. You often find that people have to go through a lawyer and create a document to handle an art transaction, or they rely on the a bill of sale or invoicing from a major art gallery, which with it comes some responsibilities and warranties. And certainly one of the reasons the auction houses have become so important in the art market over the last several years is they are the exchanges that provide a wrapper for buying and selling. If you buy a fake work of art from many dealers, as Pierre Lagrange did from Nerdler, and you go back to them and say, hey, you screwed me, this thing's fake, they can roll up shop and say, sorry, we're out of business, which is what Nerdler did. And then you're forced to sue them. And it's a very time consuming and expensive way of getting back your money. If you go to the auction houses, they'll give you back your money. They do so much volume. They have so many customers. They provide the backstop, the warranties and guarantees that they will pay off the problems that they have. So people prefer to use these kinds of structures because they're safer. And in many ways, that's what these NFT minting marketplaces have become for digital images. So I guess where I got the confusion has been, how is all of this going to impact the art market? And the issue is basically been that it's not impacted the art market. It's run on its own separate world. It's its own artists. It's its own buyers. One of the most important things to understand about this is almost all of the money going into NFTs is coming out of cryptocurrency.
It's an interesting, and I want to follow up on that. But first, I did want to hear from one new NFT artist.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you my name because all you need to know about me is that I'm a young, unknown digital artist or a collective of artists. Now, you and me, we get it. Our parents, they laugh at non-refundable tokens and cryptic currencies. It can't go on the wall, they say. Is the world ending? No, hardly. This is a cultural moment, a bridge from the past to the future. And a bridge is about trust, as in the saying, if you believe that, I've got a bridge to sell you. When you believe someone, you see, you trust them, and then you buy a bridge from them. It's that simple. So today, I've got a bridge to sell you, the Brooklyn Bridge NFT, and I will now sign it. The auction is live now.
Okay, I think that was worth it.
Yeah, by the way, brilliant in its mangled phrases and parody of trust and all. Look, so the NFT world is about people who are deeply involved in crypto, and you know that people who are involved in crypto are evangelists for cryptocurrency. And cryptocurrency has become extremely valuable, but there are very few uses for it. One of the things you can buy with crypto are NFTs. If you sell your crypto, you have all sorts of compliance issues. The banks won't deal with you. It's very difficult to get your money out of crypto. And if you are a buyer of any sort of art, there is a tendency of the wealthy of any particular era fastening onto artists and art related to their own experience. So wealthy baby boomers late in life buy muscle cars because they couldn't get those cars when they were teenagers. A lot of real estate developers buy artists who are related to experiences they had when they were making their money. One of the things the auction house people like to say is that the collectors are often buying artists that they identify with in the same period that they found their success. This is also true of the crypto rich. So they have been looking for digital artists that they identify with, who are also evangelical about digital properties, where they can invest their money that they pulled out of crypto. The problem is there's really no other market for these works. There's not a lot of deep demand. Yes, there's the joke about, you can't hang it on a wall. What's the use for this? Philosophically, there's no problem with the concept of an NFT being a certificate of authenticity. There are a number of very successful and valuable artists who, when you buy their work, you do not buy a physical object. You actually buy either instructions or a certificate of authenticity. There is a famous artist who's deceased who makes sculpture out of candies. And if you own one of those works, the physical work is a pile of candies. You're actually meant to take them and consume them. It was meant to be a metaphor about AIDS and wasting away and so forth. You can put those candies in a pile in the corner. You can spread them out along the floor. You have that work of art, not because you bought the right candies, though you have to buy specific candies to do it, but because you have a certificate of authenticity that says you own this work of art. And those traded for millions of dollars, so not inconsiderable sums. So conceptually, the idea of an NFT, there's nothing wrong with it. The problem here is an artist like Beeple is a guy who has been making art and has a big Instagram account, but has never actually been an artist in any other way. His whole presence as an artist has been putting work on Instagram, until about November, when he learned about NFTs and he started minting NFTs. And it started a cycle and a process where people started investing in them and flipping them, and the value increased on them. And then finally, two guys took a group of works he had made, and they spent about $2 million assembling this group of works. Then they tokenized that body of work and sold the tokens for, I think they created a nominal value of up to around $200 million. And it is those guys who went and spent the $69 million on the Beeple at Christie's. Why? They wanted the validation. By pulling that stunt, they made everyone pay attention to it.
Well, they
also
spent
had
$2
an
million
investment.
to develop it and then paid $69 million to own it?
No. They paid $2 million to develop this token. They issued the tokens and made tens of millions, if not 100 million or more in token sales. Then they took the money from those token sales and spent it. These are ETH tokens, so they spent it on the other work, the everyday work that sold for 69 million. So there's no real hard cash being sold here, and the cash that they had, the crypto that they had, they acquired by tokenizing these other works.
Right. Now, it should also be said that the people, Michael Winkelmann, is just some guy with a computer science degree from Wisconsin. And
well, no. I mean, he's a guy who spent 13 years creating art every day. That's his conceptual work. I mean, there are legitimate, well thought of, important artists who did something similar. There's a very valuable, well-known, now deceased artist, Ankawara, whose work consists entirely of paintings of the date of when he painted them, often in the same font. Most of them are gray, some are red. Usually on the inside of there are newspaper clippings and other things from the day that he made these paintings. But you will see dozens, hundreds of Ankawara paintings that are simply a date on a gray background. To most of us who look at that and they say, why is that art? So Beeple has been creating images. Many of them are cartoonish, often satirical. Some of them are lewd. Many of them, it turns out, someone looked through them, are racist or questionably racist. And all. My point is, you are an artist if you embark upon a project that you work on for 13 and a half years. You don't have to like that as art. You can even say it's not art, but the person doing it is legitimately engaged in what they call an artistic practice. Mm-hmm. Now, whether that has value is for other people to decide, but the artist has devoted his time to doing it, and that's what Beeple was doing. And that indeed is what that work is. The 5,000 images in that thing is the summation of all of his work.
All right, so
now that's a great painting.
Okay, tell us what we're looking at. Just bear in mind, and just assume we're Philistines. Assume we're just
You're not Philistine. So
we're too lazy to become investigative journalists and not talented enough to be sports.
look, let's remember the value of all art is social. Everyone gets fixated on the prices paid, but the prices, again, almost like what I was saying earlier, we live in a world where the wealthiest have become very wealthy. Their money, it comes easier to them. This last year, all the rich people got much richer. If you are a rich person who has, the necessaries of life taken care of, the luxuries of life taken care of, and you have interests in other things, you've reached to some other level of Maslow's pyramid, you begin to become interested in things that are connected to a broader sense of culture and history. It's not uncommon for people want to own things owned by other famous persons or powerful persons. So provenance is important because it connects you. By buying a work once owned by the Rockefellers, that puts you in a degree of separation from the Rockefellers. That's a powerful and heady thing for many people.
Right, but Marion, what's special about this? And I'm asking from the point of the business part.
Well, I just need to give you that preface. Okay. So this is a work by David Hockney. David Hockney is a British artist from Yorkshire, but he early on in his life moved to California, and he was besotted with the life of Hollywood and sunny LA. And lived there for 40 years, I think, maybe 50. And he created a series of paintings that featured pools that for many years were some of his most famous works. He also created a series of large double portraits, and some of them are of local Los Angeles wealthy patrons. There's a famous one of his parents. This one is a portrait of his lover and partner of many years after they broke up. It's actually set in the Tuscan Hills, is the background landscape that you see. And the image is a fairly complex commentary on their life together and the artist's ambitions. The reason it is so valuable is somewhat twofold. One, it was owned by a number of very important collectors who recognized these works early. Hockney was well known for his LA works for many years, but there was a huge retrospective that toured the world a few years ago. And in that, there was a main room that featured these huge double portraits, many of which are in some of the world's most important museums. There's only 3 of them, I think, that are privately owned, maybe 4.
Well, how much did this go for?
$90 million.
Okay, hard to top that. So what are we looking at?
And it was bought by a Saudi who previously had no real interest or knowledge of David Hockney. So he was buying it because it was touted and everyone understood it to be sought after. And so he wanted to, have a thing sought after by others.
All right. So a Saudi bought a painting of 2 gay dudes before AIDS. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
All right. So now what are we looking at?
So Jeff Koons, who is, probably one of the most significant artists of the late 20th century, whose work some people used to try and say it was, a critique of consumerism and all, has created a number of important works, and on a couple of different occasions, his work has, reached a record for a living artist. This particular work comes from an early series that he did. Koons is a conceptual artist. He doesn't make the objects. He hires craftsmen to make them. He's notorious for, having incredible standards. One of the things that he did early on in his career was cast objects in bronze that look almost like like an inflatable, like they're light, but they're actually these heavy bronze objects. This series of there are 3 of them, I believe. I think there's 3. There might be a 4th, but of works, this bunny is generally seen to be probably the epitome of those works. This photograph doesn't really do it justice. If you go to the Broad Museum in LA, you can see one of these objects, and it sits in front of a massive blue balloon dog.
And this is the balloon dog guy.
Same guy, Jeff
Yeah.
Koons,
Yeah.
same body of, well, slightly different bodies of work, but previously a balloon dog had been the most expensive work by a living artist when one was bought for $58 million. I can't remember.
How much did the rabbit go for?
$92 million.
Okay, so that's not okay, and that brings us to.
And hold on a second. Let's just the person who bought this.
Mhm.
I just did an interview with the guy who held the paddle, but he insists, he had nothing to do with the decision. But the person who bought it is a major industrialist, has a private museum that's open to the public, and is nobody's fool. So, I mean, it's important to remember that there are, for every Saudi, there's also a Mitchell Rails buying these objects. But let's go on.
Okay, so that brings us to this. What is this?
Well, this is the Beeple 5,000 days, and it is an array of every image he created on every day for 5,000 days preceding, I think relatively soon before it was minted. So you can see in the upper left-hand corner his sort of early work, and it just goes sequentially, images he made every day. And this is the work that sold. Well, if we believe the underbidder, it would have sold for a lot more than $69 million, because the underbidder claims that, and I know that Christie's had problems with it, that his bidding was locked out, and he had intended to go higher, at least to 70 million. So it could have been an $80 million work of art.
Just with that kind of money at stake, you'd think they'd have better IT. But,
yes.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
they were overwhelmed. They really didn't know or expect to have that many people watching the auction.
yeah, but it came down to 2 guys.
Right.
Yes.
But it's still, you've got lots of other people on the site. It overwhelms them. Look, you've chosen a good array here, because what's the problem here is this is none of the other works by Beeple until November were meaningful to anyone, or probably even seen by most people. If they were seen, they were seen on Instagram. That rabbit has been seen in museum shows around the world for 40 years. That was made in the 80s. It is a very famous work of art. It is a work of art that people have discussed, have sought after, have hankered for, have written treatises about. The same thing with the double portrait. David Hockney's a major artist, has had many museum shows and many people involved in explicating his work and talking about, having a cultural significance. That's the dividing line here. There's no cultural significance to Beeple prior to Instagram, and certainly prior to, November, when they first started minting some of these.
Right, but I mean, we took a look at the Koons and at the Hockney and at the Beeple, and what occurs to me is that this is all well within like a 40-year history span. And if you take a look at say, Leonardo, we know that what was almost certainly a fake went for top dollar recently. And
What was certainly a fake? The Salvador Mundi?
yeah,
No, that's not a fake.
it's not okay, because I've
No.
a lot of
No. Look, here's an important thing to remember about the art world and art market, especially in our times where we have intensive inequality. There is rage against the wealth and inequality, and that creates immediately people trying to denigrate anything that is done. There is within the world of attribution for Renaissance artworks, that attribution of the Salvador Mundi is pretty damn rock solid. It is they showed that work at the National Gallery in 2010, and there was a preponderance of scholars who all believe that it's a substantial amount of the work was done by Leonardo. Any artist is going to work in a studio is only going to do parts of the work. It is admittedly a wreck of a painting. It has lost a great deal of the original paint and material. A lot of work has been done. None of that was hidden. But the mudslinging that it's a fake, the Ben Lewises of the world are just trying to promote themselves off of basically tabloid accusations.
Okay, then I'm going to withdraw that, but my point remains that a Lost Leonardo surfaces, there's going to be a rush to shut up and take my money.
Well, no. So again, it's a little more complex than that. That Leonardo was not only after that 2010 show. So that Leonardo was discovered in a New Orleans auction by Robert Simon, who thought there was something interesting about it, bought it, brought it to a bunch of people who were experts, had it cleaned, did the research, got it to the point where they got it into that National Gallery Da Vinci show in London in 2010. After that, they were asking, I think, $120 million for a long time. They couldn't find a buyer. They eventually sold it to a Russian oligarch, Dmitry Rybolovlev, who paid really sort of, I think, $80 million for it. And it was over, it was kind of hard to get the sale done. They were certainly disappointed. They thought they deserved more. And indeed, later when it sold for a lot more, there were some lawsuits back and forth, of sort of hurt feelings and all of that. Let me just want to make this one point. When Christie's decided to sell the Leonardo, they were actually trying to sell two paintings at the same time. The guy who put the sale together, Loic Guzer, had an idea, a great marketing idea. There was an enormous Warhol painting owned by a group of collectors.
Marion, I got to stop you right there, just in interest of time. We wanted to talk about NFTs, but my point was that
well, I just got to fit, but I have to finish that point because it's an important one.
Okay.
Just let me fit because it's important to all of the thing. It connects to the NFTs. Okay. What Christie's did was toured that painting around the world, the Leonardo, and people lined up around the block to see it. And that is what the Saudis bought. The Saudis bought the demonstration that people would line up around the block to see this painting because MBS was going to use it in a museum. It is the social affirmation is what generates value with art. The demonstration of social affirmation, which is why the guys behind Beeple went and bid it up because they already had an investment in this tokenized work, and they were creating that demonstration of social value.
All right. So, but I think my question is, if you take a look at the Koons and at the Hockney and at the Beeple, are people still going to be bidding this high 500 years from now for that than they're bidding for Leonardo now?
There's no telling. The whole the story of the art market is things that are very valuable in one period are often not valuable after that. This is, again, there's this idea, there's an idea that there is somehow fixed value in art. There's no fixed value in anything. People exchange money. What's the old Ben Graham line? In the short term, the market's a voting machine. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. The art market is only ever a voting machine, right? There is no other value to art but its social value. So there are works of art that were very expensive at the end of the 19th century, lost their value over time because people weren't interested in that artist, and then over time regained their value and sold for a lot of money at the end of the 20th century. It is all about positioning, and it's about the social value to different people. Right now, the biggest spenders in the art market are Asian buyers, and they're buying Western art for a lot of complex reasons.
Right. And I want to talk to you a little bit about who the buyers are. You said earlier that that NFT buyers are crypto bros, and the traditional, or the legacy art world is
Analog.
old money, kind of a vibe. But what seems to me is that there's a third part of this Venn diagram, which is money launderers. And I was wondering, you don't believe that that money's laundered through the art market?
This is les liaisons dangereuses. The wealthy must be immoral, and so the art market is they're spending lots of money on nothing, so it must be all money laundering. Look, here's the thing that we know about the art market. There are about 3 cases of proven money laundering using art. And that's not because the art market is a bunch of Boy Scouts or moral or ethical. It's quite the opposite. There are plenty of people who will sell you a $5 million Monet painting. Good luck selling it for $5 million in another country to launder your money. The value of art is very difficult to maintain, and certainly in transactions to move from one place. As a vehicle, property is much better for money laundering. That's why we have the whole FinCEN situation around real estate in New York, Honolulu, Miami, and so forth. In the art market, we know of, like I said, 3 main cases. One of the most important money laundering cases wasn't done intentionally to launder money. That was just the outcome. Joe Low bought a lot of art for about $300 million. He took a loan out for it to build his yacht. He surrendered the art because, hey, it all came easy to him. And the art was sold at Sotheby's for half of what he paid for it. But he didn't do that intentionally. He did it because he was a thief and he just needed the cash. Right. The other cases are vanishingly small, and we, like I said, I've got no problem with there being accusing it if we could find it. We just can't find it.
All right, fair enough. So I want to talk a little bit, or actually I was hoping to get to this 20, 30 minutes ago. But
sorry, talk too much.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about ARTnews's coverage of the Beeple auction. I noticed that in addition to your byline and Angelica Villa's, and you two wrote most of the coverage, but I also see like at least 3 other names connected to this story at ARTnews. At what point did you realize that you needed to give this team coverage, and what, I mean, it seems like a lot of resources to throw at a story.
Well, it's a big story, and it intersects with a bunch of other ones. I thought the Shanti Escalante de Maffei did a great story on finding one of the NFT buyers and sort of profiling him. This was before the Beeple auction. Kyle Chaika wrote a couple of good pieces. He actually wrote a piece in the New Yorker about all this, but Kyle works with us. Don't get me started on why that piece appeared in the New Yorker. We've got a couple of other people on the Art in America side who have been, doing explainers and showing other NFT art that, it has a longer pedigree as art. Look, we're in the process of revamping what these titles can do. So it's important when there's I perceive to be a big story, to make sure that we're on it and we own whatever of it we can. And so we devoted the resources to the extent that we could find things to write about. Like I said, it stops being an art story very quickly, and there's only so much we can do about the crypto side of it.
Right, fair enough. And I was also, I'm just curious here, but since this Beeple story blew up, have you noticed an increase in citations of ARTnews articles or an increase in viewership?
Well, no, our traffic has been fairly steady over the last 4 or 5 months. At around, I think it's around 2.5 million page views, 1 million to 1.3 million unique visitors. I'll be honest with you, the brands are owned by Penske Media, and Jay Penske is not very happy with me because my traffic isn't anywhere near where he wants it to be. These titles were bought by Jay a little over 2 years ago. They fit in with the other Penske brands. If you're not familiar with Penske Media, we own Variety, Women's Wear Daily, Rolling Stone, Rob Report, now Billboard and The Hollywood Reporter, and a number of other websites like IndieWire and so forth. And our model is a combination of being a trade journal for these industries and reaching a broader audience. Art sits in a unique place that many of the constituents for buying art these days are in the music, entertainment, fashion, and luxury industries. And we also feel that, ultimately, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, that the rising importance of art in the global economy and in our own suggests that there should be something of the size of Variety or Rolling Stone covering the art world. These magazines were owned by Peter Brandt prior to Jay's buying them. They were underinvested in for a number of years. They were magazines primarily. So we are following a sort of formula that Jay has had over the years, turning these into digital properties and extending their reach. And so this is part of that process.
Right. I have one last question before opening it up to the gallery, and that is, what lessons can financial writers learn from arts journalists when it comes to covering new or unfamiliar forms? I mean, after the past couple of financial crises, it became pretty clear that we can be slow studies sometimes when something new goes wrong. And it seems like in the arts, something weird comes along and say, yeah, that reminds me of something that happened 40 years ago. So.
Right. Well, but I think the art world is undercovered just because people tend to, again, treat it like it's something for, rich people. And one of the issues around the money laundering stuff and all is, oh, no one really cares because, if you get ripped off in the art world, it's a bunch of rich people losing some money and the feds aren't going to devote the time or energy to that. I think, first of all, there's a couple of things. One, the art world has become much more important in all of these other creative industries. There's now a regular crossover between art and music, art and fashion, in terms of collaborations, in terms of the what people prize. You know, when Jay-Z is doing songs where he's rhyming Picasso, you know, we're in a different world. It is a big business.
Basquiat and Notorious RBG, but yeah, okay, go on.
So we've gotten to the place where the artists have tremendous currency that we often don't acknowledge. So Yayoi Kusama has huge crowds that go see her shows around the world. There are, you know, the last figure I saw was 880 million people in the United States went to museums in a year, which is actually a greater figure than go to sporting events. Now, obviously, museums aren't broadcast on television. There's a much greater reach for sports, but there is a serious constituency. And like all other businesses, it's run by people and all the same motivations and behaviors. There's frauds, there's hubris, there's people pulling off great things.
Referring to my question, you know, Marion, I was not trying to indict arts journalism. You know, quite the opposite. I'm asking, what do you guys get right that we routinely get wrong?
I don't think we get anything more right or wrong than you do. I mean, it's journalism is journalism. We see things that look odd or have interesting elements to them, and we try and scratch at them, and you know, not take, you know, there's the journalist's extreme skepticism balanced by our, you know, tendency to want to, you know, sell the soap along with the people who we're covering is always a dialectic, right? We're always torn between these two poles of what we're doing. Sometimes, like the art and money laundering, there's a level of extreme skepticism that just isn't there, not because I don't get the desire to or the suspicion, but you know, sometimes you have to say, okay, we looked and we can't find it. So I don't think it's a difference. I think it's the other way around. I would like to see journalists to take the art world more seriously. Stop treating it like it's some special space that has different rules. It's run by human beings. All the same rules apply. We've got people who do things the right way and people who do them the wrong. And there's always a fascinating story in it.
Right. So any advice for say financial journalists who have an interest in the arts?
Well, I think a lot of it is following the people who, you know, one of the important things about the art world is many of the people who are deeply invested in it are substantial members of the financial community. You know, Ken Griffin is spending on a regular basis several $100 million a year on art. So is Stevie Cohen. So is Leon Black. I mean, we've got a lot of people who populate this world who are covered by the financial world, and they tend to, like I said, sort of shut off when it goes to the art side. I mean, there is a certain reputation laundering that's been going on for years using art, whether it's the building a museum or, you know, one of the first things Stevie Cohen did when he finally emerged from secrecy around 2000 was use his art collection as a way to get attention and humanize him. There's a lot of people who we're letting them use the art in ways that we probably shouldn't let them get away with, and should be more skeptical about that.
All right, so I'm going to just open it up to the gallery now. And just shout out. Oh, from Carolyn. Oh, we have a question from Carolyn. Since Beeple is an American, first of all, yeah, he is, yeah. How does he get paid the $69 million exactly? And what are the tax implications for him and the buyer? If the work's not tangible, does it exist as the buyer's property in their own country and count as part of their estate, like the art on their walls?
Well, My understanding is, I'm glad you asked because I did some reporting on this. Near as we can tell, well, one, Kyle did some direct reporting with Beeple himself, so he sold the crypto almost immediately after it hit his account. He sold it. We were discussing this. Through one of the few exchanges that you can. Remember, there's a big problem is do the anti-money laundering protocols. If you can't show where your money came from with crypto, you can't necessarily turn it into cash. Now, I think going through Christie's helped with that and made it easier. As far as I can tell, the tax implications are you would be taxed as income, not as capital gains. Most art is taxed as capital gains when you sell it. And it's not tangible property, but if your estate owned the patent on something which is not tangible, that would be valued as part of your estate. It's no different from any other legal right that you own, but isn't necessarily a physical object. We own lots of stock, but it's almost never actually tangible physical stock certificates. So it shouldn't be any different that way.
Yeah, but also when you sell stocks, it's a capital gain. But I agree with you that conceptually, yeah, this should be earned income. But I would think that when you sold the ether for US dollars, that would have been a capital gain there.
Well, this is one of the rare cases. Most objects sold at an auction house are not sold by their creator, right? So this is one of the rare cases where it's a direct sale from the artist through the auction house. That's the only reason we think it would be taxed as income, not as capital gains. Like, when an artist donates a work to a charity auction, they can only deduct the cost of materials. They cannot deduct the value of the work of art.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from the gallery? Well, if not, or just to stall for time, I just want to read a quote from Marion's editorial piece in the wake of this story. NFTs are creating effects that are hilariously and tragically the opposite of the utopian fantasies so many have placed upon them. Please expound.
Well, look, I mean, I wrote something previously about the conversations about crypto, about NFTs, but crypto on Clubhouse, where everyone keeps talking about democratizing the art market. And what I realized is that they're not really interested in they're talking about wanting to have access to the art market. One of the issues with art is people feel intimidated by it. They feel excluded from it. It is a separate language. Again, we just talked about this. Why is that bunny, right? We're confronted with what looks like a Disney object and someone telling you that object is worth $90 million to a really smart guy, right? To a billionaire who's nobody's fool. It's pretty upsetting. The cognitive dissonance is off the charts. What am I missing about the value of this thing that I just can't get? It must be either foolish or I must be an idiot some way. And much of the discussion around NFTs was, oh, it'll democratize the art market, as if people would somehow gain access to all of this through NFTs. Now, of course, if you want to democratize the art market, there are hundreds of thousands of artists out there who would love to sell you their work. You could go out and buy it, and you'd be democratizing the art market beautifully that way. But people grafted onto this thing the idea that they were somehow going to change the nature of who understands what. Right. What we also saw was that's the hilarious part. The tragic part is what we saw is all the replication of the what people see as being opaque and manipulative in the art market, which often happens, And it's true, especially at the highest dollar values. A lot of those sales are not what they seem. And then we had these guys reconstruct the same sort of it's not what they seem kind of sale. And so other people are thinking, wow, that thing must be really worth money. Maybe I'll go buy an NFT. Now we've got some polls suggesting that people 27% of the US population would buy an NFT. I mean, that's nuts. What are they going to do with these things?
27% won't buy Bitcoin. But anyway, I mean, isn't there something that wasn't another part of the NFT experience supposed to be that up to now, whenever an artist sold a work, that was it. I mean, they exchanged money for,
yes, the artist royalties.
Yeah, they never get royalties. But NFTs running on the Ethereum chain can be structured as smart contracts. It can be set up so that every time this changes hand, Beeple or whoever else gets 10% of the cut, but that's not happening.
Well, it can happen. I mean, look, there have been artist royalties established in a bunch of different places. They exist in Europe. They exist in Australia. The limitation on artist royalties is that the paperwork is a pain in the ass and it often doesn't get collected. And of course, remember, there's the number of artists whose work is actually worth real money is tiny. And so that's not where an artist is going to make their money on these resales or the royalties. The royalties seems like it's fair, but it actually in practice doesn't generate that much revenue. Even if you're talking about Hockney getting, 6% or 3% of that $90 million. He's going to make a lot more money because from the works that he owns and has held on to and will sell later, or the works that of his later period that are being sold at higher prices because of his fame and reputation. So for the most part, it's not a practical limitation for artists, the lack of a royalty. But yes, that was one of the hopes. And if you could somehow make people want to buy more of these objects because they're digital and all, it would create a mass market for artists. And the balance between scarcity and plenty in a body of artists' work has been an issue that has been playing out over the last 20 years. There's an artist named Takashi Murakami who created a lot of work and a larger body of work. Damien Hirst is famous for doing a large body of spot paintings. And Koons is also famous for the balloon dogs, plates and all that he does with Bernardo and all. So there has been this almost like fashion diffusion lines. There has been this issue in the art market of creating enough work to satisfy a large enough group to give your work currency. But that's a very complex and delicate thing. And for every example where we sort of see it happening, we see other examples where the opposite happens.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? If not, Marion Maneker from ARTnews, thank you very much for your time. And one last question: are you accepting pitches?
Yeah, I would love to hear from people. Like I said, we need serious examination of a lot of the different things that take place in the art world. And I'm happy to hear pitches, but I'm also happy to hear from anyone who just wants to hear from us what we'd like to see covered and all. One of our problems with the art world is it's been hermetically sealed, and people with experience in art don't necessarily have journalism experience. And as I've said earlier, the people who have serious journalism experience tend to discount the art world and the art market. So I'm more than happy anyone who wants to try and cross the divide to show them the way.
Aren't you all glad that you stayed on till the end? All right, so that's the show.